this series, I speak with 8 incredible thinkers in Africa, people working to solve complex challenges across the board. We discuss the civic space in Africa, the physical and online spaces where people come together to exercise their rights in shaping our societies. The civic space is important because it provides everyone with an opportunity to contribute to a thriving, inclusive society. Join us for these diverse topics, from ensuring technology positively serves society to ensuring that communities come together to increase women and youth's participation in decision-making. If you could go back, is there anything you could change or anything you would do different?
Yeah, I would be kinder to myself.
Okay.
So one of the drawbacks of being a first is that you're not allowed to make mistakes. And that's a baggage I've carried with me, I think, ever since. I just don't allow myself to fail. It's not an option. Because any mistake I made, any failure that I accrued became a justification for why women and why young people should not be allowed power. And actually, that's the essence of politics. We're seeking power so that we can have the means to transform people's lives, because those who have the power today are not doing it effectively. And there's often a fear and a stigma around the idea of young people having power, that they'll be reckless, that they'll be silly, that they will mismanage it.
Is there any evidence of that?
There's no evidence of that, none whatsoever. In fact, the data is clear where there's more diversity in political leadership, gender and age diversity, corruption goes down, delivery is more effective. And intractable issues that maybe older leaders or exclusively male leaders don't even know about or understand are then changed through law and through regulation. So more women's rights, more children's rights, better education outcomes, all of these things that an older generation of leaders are kind of so far removed from in their lived experience that they're not often able to connect with. So no, there is no evidence for that. But it's a stigma that enables gatekeepers to stay in power forever, right? If being young is a limitation on leading, if you must wait your turn, young person, then I can stay in power as long as I like. And I think that's the real objective.
Is there a way and is there room for young people to change this persistent narrative that young people are unable to govern and lead? And is this why you formed Futurelect?
Yes, I believe the only way to change it is to prove it incorrect through evidence. More young people getting elected into power, getting elected into office, not just as tokens or symbols or diversity additions, but people who actually win power from older opponents or incumbents, and then who wield that power with integrity, with ethics and accountability, and with the best interests of their people in mind. That's the evidence that we're going to need. I also want to say that it's not the case that being young makes you not corrupt or not incompetent. That's not the case either. But it turns out to be the case that because women and young people have to face higher barriers, only the best of them actually make it through. So once you lower the barriers, you're going to have more young people, more women coming through the ranks. And yes, there will be some who are not up to the task, because excellence and mediocrity are equally distributed, right, in every population. But at the moment, because the barriers are so high, only the people who can survive these real massive, barriers to entry, who are excellent at what they do, are actually making it through. But they're not enough numbers. They're still mostly symbolic, and not enough there's not enough evidence of young people, young heads of state, young cabinet ministers, young members of the judiciary, leading in society at the political level. They lead in business, they lead in higher education, in the legal fraternity, but they're not allowed space to lead in politics. We have to change that.
A lot of young people on the continent, more so I speak from East African experience, the cost of running for elections is super high.
Yes.
Running for a parliamentary seat in Kenya is roughly $190,000. In Uganda, it's roughly $90,000.
Yeah.
That already is a huge barrier to entry, not just for young people, but for women who are often marginalized and don't have the economic power to engage. What then, and how do we change that for young Africans and women to be able to say, okay, this cost is extremely high, but I can find different ways of engaging. Is that even possible?
Yeah. So our philosophy at Futurelect is that we're supporting ethical leaders and transformational leaders.
Yes.
The reason we say that they're transformational is because we're not electing leaders of the status quo. We want people who will go into the system and then analyze what's wrong with it. The democratic systems in our countries may be functional, but they're not perfect. There's aspects of them that are dysfunctional, that are broken. And this is one of them, right? That the fact that there's a ticket price attached to any seat as a representative, it does automatically mean that you are more likely to be older because you've amassed your own income and savings, but you've also got the networks to raise money from. And the younger you are, the less likely that is to be a possibility for you. And so that automatically locks a whole group of people out. Same with women. But there are many, many interventions that we can make now for young people and women to make it into the existing system. And then when they're in it, they need to change it. We need to have limits on campaign spending. We need to have rules and regulations about who can give and who can't. But the first barrier is getting the people who do run for office enough of that kind of seed funding, that venture capital investment, to get them elected into office. And my philosophy on this is that it's exactly the same as investing in businesses. Young people start businesses all the time. They approach venture capital funders, and venture capitalists will invest in some businesses that are successful and others that are not. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but if you are somebody who believes in democracy, who believes in transforming leadership, if you're an organization that gives to democracy building civil society organizations, then why shouldn't you give to democracy building political candidates so that they can get into the system and transform it for the better? So yes, there's a lot of challenges to this idea. It's quite a radical departure from the traditional way in which political candidates are funded. But there are people interfering in the electoral process for the worse, not for the better. We can behave, like very pure angels on the one side, but there are people actively putting their thumb on the scale and influencing outcomes by channeling funding to people with autocratic tendencies who are not here to advance democratic outcomes and who are not here to give our citizens the self-determination that they have said over and over again that they want. So I think we have to find a way. We have to find a way. It doesn't have to be a permanent solution, but there has to be some intervention that is going to, from a philanthropic perspective, support people who wouldn't ordinarily have access to resources to make it into the space and demonstrate that women and young people can lead and can lead with integrity.
You've been listening to Talk to Me Direct. Follow and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.